PS5 error code CE-108262-9. This error code is a doozy. As you're playing the PS5, it could be in-game, the home menu, it could be in the interface, and at any given moment, what ends up happening is the PS5 seems unable to read software. And what ends up happening is it'll essentially shut down the app and or entirely. Now this is where the investigation comes in, because I purchased my PS5 on, so this is a launch PS5. I was lucky enough to grab one in 2020, and I would say shortly after I received it, maybe a few months, I noticed some glitches in it. As I have to find out how to fix this. Unfortunately, I'm out of warranty, like I know many of you guys are if you bought your console at launch. Okay, this is a disc edition. That's going to be important later. I got into touch with Sony, and they basically were telling me, okay, they were giving me these troubleshoots. Okay, I know we all know about these. The first troubleshoot is to update your system. I updated, doesn't work. Second troubleshoot is to enter safe mode and now rebuild your database, update via safe mode, or reinstall the software via the USB. Now that was something I did countless times. The third step that I realized a lot of people were talking about online were the accessory base, whether it be the HDMI cable, whether it has to be replaced. You have to turn off HDMI link in the settings that links to your TV. I also looked at the ideas of the power cable being an issue, right? So now you're talking about a power supply. But listen, what I noticed a few things. I was concerned whether this was a software or a hardware issue. I started to think it might have been a hardware issue based off of the fact that I kept reinstalling the software and it was still giving me a problem occurred with software last time you used the system, right? So it'll just shut off, go black screen, it'll just close the app telling me it's corrupted, and I would always get that error code that we're talking about, amongst others, but that one was the main one. And what's fishy is that one doesn't show up in the error history of the codes you sent to Sony, so I don't even think they're getting it, and I was very curious about that. So long story short, what I did was I started to get very curious, because what happened was they're trying to charge me $230 for an issue that to me seems to be based in their fault, not mine. Okay, so after all of those steps, I changed the power cord, I changed the HDMI cord, I reinstalled on USB, I updated via safe mode, everything, none of that worked. And essentially at this point, people will tell you, okay, you just got to send in your console. And honestly, if you have the means to, go ahead. But for me, I was a bit more, I'm a bit more of a student of the game. So something about it was just telling me, listen, you may be able to fix this. And here's why. Because for one, I noticed if it was a power issue, right? When the system turns off and goes black, when I turn it back on, it doesn't tell me that it was unplugged improperly. If you unplug the system, you turn it back on, it'll say you unplugged it improperly. Okay, that's one. It didn't say that. Number two, if it were overheating, right? Like they also say it's an overheating thing, and it shuts off, it would make this beep, because I accidentally didn't plug in the fan and I turned on the game and Ghost of Tsushima and it just shut off completely. Okay, it's not overheating. Remember, it's not overheating and it's not shutting down improperly. So I started to ask myself, is it the battery? Because it constantly turns back on. I went in, I took off these shells, which is very self-explanatory, and I cleaned up, right? It was a little dusty, but it wasn't nearly as much dust to cause any such issue. And this is when I started to get very invasive, okay? So here's a warning. Going forward, I only suggest this if you're comfortable with dismantling a system and if you are out of warranty. If you're still in warranty, don't do this. But if you're out of warranty and you don't have the extra $230 or $50 to send, I promise this isn't necessarily, you're not changing any thermal paste or anything. Essentially, what you're doing is, and I'm only saying this because I may have found the fix. So essentially what I started to think was this. I said, the first time I saw this was when I put in a disc. I put in the disc and it froze. So as I went into the PS5, I noticed something. I noticed this. This is the Sony disk drive that comes with the PlayStation. And if you noticed, it's a totally entirely different piece, okay? And not only is it a different piece, but it's also attached to its own form of like motherboard here, right? If you look at the at this hard drive, you can't just buy this from anywhere else because it has specific chips here that will only work with the PS5. So I thought to myself, I said, do I need this? Essentially what I did is, and this is something you can do without being extremely invasive, okay? This is my first fix, is take off the disk drive. If you have a PS5 disk drive, you're gonna have to remove this cable here, which you can do. It's right next to the fan, right? The next one is this ribbon that's under the black covering. So you'll have to remove half of the PS5, which is not difficult, but this will be right under. And as you're taking these wires out, be careful, okay? You have to use patience with this. You're gonna have to basically jiggle it out without pulling from the wire part. So find the piece of the plastic that's attached to the cord and just try to shimmy it out. I've seen many people break it out of frustration. Second is the ribbon under it. All you have to do is, there's a lever here that you push down on the base, and then you pull out with this blue little ribbon, this blue attachment piece. You just yank it out softly. It'll easily come out if you remove this clasp. You push down on it. I decided, let me take that out. When I took that out, the initial part when I took it out, I forgot about the ribbon under it. So I just took off that little top one, the one that you can visibly see. I took that out and I played it, and it was playing pretty well. Surprisingly, I was at a point where I couldn't even have it sit for more than 4, maybe 3 minutes, and it'll just shut off. I didn't realize that ribbon cable was on the bottom, so unfortunately it shut down again. And I thought that was the fix, okay? So now I said to myself, man, I have to go in here. So I finally decided, because I wanted to say, if it can't be the battery, it's not the HDMI, okay, it's not dusty, so what is it? It has to be the motherboard. Something with the motherboard, okay? And now, to be honest, I know nothing about motherboards, soldering. These are things that I really want to get into, but they just seem so tedious. To preface this, I watched the teardown of the PS5 countless videos. I also watched countless videos of people trying to repair issues with the PS5, and what I noticed was there was one video where a guy bought about 15 PS5s and each one had an issue and he tried to find it. What I noticed was every time he turned one on, the issues that I saw were not related to that error code that we're talking about, the software error code. A lot of them, he would turn on the PS5, it would get glitchy. That doesn't happen. You know, the screen would come up with different pixels, but nothing was coherent. And he was telling me that might be the APU. And I said to myself, that's not happening in my system. Some of them would simply not turn on. You wouldn't be able to see them on the TV, or the power wouldn't be getting through. But none of that is happening to mine. So I said to myself, this is not a motherboard issue. Now, it might be, but I don't think that, it seems like everything is operating properly, right? The games are working, the graphics are there. It's just something unannounced, man. It's just causing this thing to say, nope, something's not right. And it shuts down. So what I decided to do was, I decided to go back in and take a look at this motherboard. Now, I was opposed to doing it. I had gotten deep enough to the power supply, but I had never gotten deep enough to get to the motherboard and separate it from the power supply chamber. So what I did was I went in, and this is something that I think is important, okay? This is my second fix, and I'm not sure. I know it's one of these three because, like I said, my system is working now, knock on wood. But what I did was, if you look and you go deep enough to the point where you're looking at the motherboard covered by that chrome plate, that last step before you take the chrome plate off and you see the motherboard, that side, that's not where the heatsink is, I removed that plate, essentially exposing the motherboard. And what I did was, I simply unplugged the motherboard from the power supply. Now you might be saying, oh, that's cool and all, but how could that fix something? I don't know. But what I did was I completely unplugged that. I took that ribbon cable that connects the motherboard to that little piece, and it might not even be the power supply, but it's just that main ribbon. It's somewhere, it's just about somewhere in this system. I believe it's in the back towards here. It's something that attaches directly to the motherboard. I unplugged that, I let it breathe, I took a little compressed air, right? Now you have to hold it vertical, otherwise it'll start spraying coolant. I just sprayed down the motherboard while it was exposed. I didn't expose the metal, the liquid metal, because I didn't take it away from the heatsink. It's just that one side where you see the little clip, that part. I never even took off the clip. And what I did was I plugged it back in. I reassembled everything, unfortunately, but I did not put the hard drive back in. And what I did was I turned it back on, and I saw online somebody said something interesting. They said, and I don't even think they noticed it, it's just some random little piece of paper. It said, not piece of paper, but on the web, it said, you know, this error code is a online service error code. And I had never saw this before. And I thought to myself, hey, is it because I'm connected to the internet? Okay, so follow with me. First thing I did, I took off the hard drive completely. Second thing I did, I unplugged the motherboard completely and separated it from any source of electricity. Anything, just separated it. Third thing I did was I turned off the Wi-Fi, the internet connection, which you can do in the setting. Go to your internet connection, turn it off. After I did these 3 things, I'm going to tell you this. My system works now. Now, I essentially played games without internet for like however long, maybe a day, just to see, because I was cautious. But I will say this. I turned my internet back on and it still works. So that leads me to believe that it could be one of 2 things possibly. It could be the hard drive. Might be something wrong with these chips here. So that as long as they're connected to the main board, it might be causing an error in reading the system. That's just an hypothesis. And I know what you're saying. You might have this issue even if you don't have a disk version. My second theory is that the actual motherboard might have some type of electrical interference, an electrical blockage, a traffic jam, you might say, somewhere in the motherboard. And unfortunately, you might not be able to release it until you unplug it completely. Unplug it, and you have a little spray can of dust. You blow on it a little bit, make sure you don't get it wet with coolant, and then you put it back in. Now, honestly, neither of these might be the fix, and I might just be completely lucky, but I promise you, that's not the case. So like I said, let's reiterate. Step 1, make sure you're up to date. Step 2, make sure that you have a clean system. Step 3, make sure that you go into safe mode and you try to update from there. You try to rebuild your database, or you try to reinstall through a USB. Now you get to the strange fixes. If you have a hard drive, disconnect it completely from your system. If you have the wherewithal and you're out of warranty, try to get into the motherboard and try to remove that plate, that metal plate, not on the heatsink side, but that metal plate, and there's a ribbon cable on that bottom portion. Same thing as the blue hard drive ribbon cord. You press on it, you pull it out, let it breathe. Take it away from the whole system, let it breathe, okay? Third, what you do is you check your internet connection. If you have a Wi-Fi connection, go to the Wi-Fi connection, turn it off, forget it, and try to find it again. Because what I also did was, I have a LAN connection, but what I did was I had a LAN connection 1, I switched it to LAN connection 2, which essentially is the same thing, but I don't know if the system is reading it, if there's something going on with the bandwidth, I don't know. But it might be interfering with the software, because I think that the software runs interchangeably with access to internet, right? Because the whole interface is based off of internet. So every time you scroll, something is coming up from the internet, something different. In game, a lot of these things are grabbing assets, I believe, from online. Like whether you're going into the game, but it's keeping you in some type of lobby live, right? So that can also be an issue. Now, I know this video was a little all over the place, but I am leaving this video because I know someone out there is suffering and I want them to find that answer. But officially, I'm back, baby. We got our PS5 working, knock on wood. If you have any questions or any hints for anyone, leave the comment in the comment section. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the videos. And we'll be back with some more gaming news. And if anything comes up, you know I'll get back to you. So thank you for watching and have a great day.